When the truth is found to be lies.
Jim Carrey has always been one of my favorite actors of all time. Out of all the actors I'm familiar with, I think he's played the widest array of memorable characters to me, ranging from The Mask, The Grinch, and even the Riddler. He generally brings a great energy to his performances that makes them fun to watch, and yet he can still play serious roles very well. So, today, I want to give you all my personal top 10 favorite Jim Carrey movies. This is, of course, my opinion, so chances are we don't share the same top 10. I will say beforehand, while I do appreciate his more serious roles, I prefer comedy in my movies, so there are a few big ones that aren't even on here. But, with that said, let's just get into the list already. Batman Forever. After failing to pitch an idea to Bruce Wayne about a beam that sends television signals into people's brains, the Riddler plots his revenge against Bruce alongside Two-Face, and it's up to Batman to stop them from wreaking havoc and controlling the minds of the people of Gotham. Now, starting off, we have a movie where Jim Carrey isn't even really the main character, but he is the main villain, and I'll be including movies like that as long as he still plays a big part in the movie. He plays his role as the Riddler pretty well. He's definitely more over the top than I think he's supposed to be in the original, but they hired Jim Carrey, so they knew what they were doing. Batman Forever is somewhere in the middle of when Batman movies were good and when they became bad. It doesn't hold a candle to Batman or Batman Returns, but it's still better than Batman and Robin. Still, you can see how they were taking things less seriously in order to be more marketable. I do generally like it when movies don't take themselves too seriously, but when Batman says stuff like this...
It's the car, right? Chicks love the car.
It's just not right. You can do humor in Batman, but have anyone but Batman himself say it. He's supposed to be pretty stoic. This was also the start of Robin being annoying. I don't like him that much here. Okay, so I've been bashing on this movie. Why did I put it here? Well, honestly, I think despite its flaws, it's a fun movie. It's very colorful, the action is fun, and more importantly, Jim Carrey is giving his 100% as always. I think he's probably the best part of the movie. I can recognize this as a flawed movie, but generally, if I have a fun time watching a movie, I'll appreciate it. This is a good popcorn flick. Don't take it too seriously, and you might have some fun.
Victory is inevitable. For if knowledge is power, then a god am.
A series of unfortunate events. When the Baudelaire children are left orphaned after their parents die in a fire, they're left under the care of Count Olaf, who's just after their parents' money. The kids try to get away from him, but with every new person that adopts them, Olaf isn't far behind. I think Jim Carrey playing Count Olaf is actually pretty perfect casting. He gets to play all of these disguises, and I think he nails them all. I admire that this movie was able to take the books and condense a couple of them into one movie, even if they had to switch around the events and all. I think they wanted to have several movies, but when they figured out it would just have to be the one, they rushed to the ending and had Olaf die. The atmosphere in the movie is pretty good, with its eerie look and all. There are plenty of locations they go to in this movie, and they're all nice to look at. I actually remember seeing the commercials for this on an old VHS, but I hadn't actually seen it until after I watched the Netflix show. I also adore the Netflix show, and I probably prefer it over the movie. But that's just because they have more time, and get to cover the full story, not just some of it. I may also go as far as to say that I prefer Neil Patrick Harris's portrayal of Count Olaf to Jim Carrey's. Again, probably just because we get to learn more about him with extended time. Regardless of how it compares to the Netflix show, this is still a good movie. Jim Carrey is a lot of fun, the Baudelaire children are likable, and the plot, while it moves really fast, is fun. I think this is a fun movie, and if you like it, I do recommend the Netflix show as well.
Goodbye, kids. It's been fun.
I'm going to get you no matter where you go, no matter what you do, I'll find you.
You are so deceived.
How the Grinch Stole Christmas. After being fed up with Whoville and their Christmas festivities, the Grinch decides to steal their Christmas. But, after doing so, he learns that the Whos don't need Christmas to be happy, even though the mayor flips the fuck out about the missing presents. So, the Grinch comes back and gives the presents back. I know a lot of people don't like this movie, and it's understandable why people wouldn't, but for me personally, I think this movie deserves some more credit. First off, when it comes to Whoville, I actually think it looks pretty good. The weird look of the town sort of helps make it stand out, and I think the Grinch's lair looks pretty good. As for the Grinch himself, I think Jim Carrey does really good at playing this jerky character and still making him enjoyable to watch. His absolute insanity is really funny to me, especially when he brings up that, for fun, he'll slowly slip into madness. The Grinch is a sympathetic character, and you can understand why he hates the Whos after how they treated him. When the Grinch just goes on a rampage after the mayor fucks with him, I think it's a pretty fun and chaotic scene. It's the Grinch who really carries this movie for me. His mannerisms are fun, and he has so many great lines. I actually like how, even after he's learned his lesson and become a good person, he's still his sarcastic self. He didn't lose his personality in the midst of all of this. He's just a better person now. I don't know, maybe you can just chalk this down to nostalgia, because I used to watch this movie a ton as a kid. But I think this is a really fun movie, and despite the Whos looking absolutely hideous, I can enjoy this Christmas flick.
So they want to get to know me, do they? They want to spend a little quality time with the Grinch. I guess I could use a little social interaction.
Dumb and Dumber. Lloyd and Harry are two dim-witted friends who get caught up in a hostage situation when Lloyd accidentally takes the ransom money from a girl he has a crush on. Lloyd just thinks he's going to return this girl's belongings to her, while being completely unaware of the situation he's gotten himself into. You wouldn't think a movie based on dumb humor would be anything of value, but to the shock of many who saw it, it turned out to be pretty cleverly written, with well-thought-out jokes about stupidity, and surprisingly, even some heart. Lloyd and Harry are both funny characters, and I enjoy the scenes of them inadvertently screwing with mental. And then after the guy accidentally dies, the criminals think Lloyd and Harry are expertly trained for this kind of stuff. Jokes like that work on me, and I also like the stuff with Lloyd's fantasies, even though it's pretty creepy how he's doing all of this for some random woman he met. But he's an idiot, so I can forgive it. He probably thinks this is how love really works. Occasionally there are some jokes that don't land for me, but there aren't too many of those. I would say 80% of the time the joke works. Beyond being hilarious, I actually found myself liking the two friends. Even when they occasionally fought, they'd come back for each other and have each other's backs. The characters are deeper than they look, with Lloyd even going on a pretty sad speech about his life.
You know what I'm sick and tired of, Harry? I'm sick and tired of having to eke my way through life. Sick and tired of being a nobody.
You don't really expect that from this kind of movie, when it's mostly just funny jokes. I'm glad I watched this movie, though I haven't seen the sequel yet. Apparently it's not that good, so I'm not really eager to watch it. Still, this movie alone did its job really well.
Hey, want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?
Bruce Almighty. Bruce Nolan is having a horrible day. After it seems like God is out to get him, Bruce gets pissed at the big guy, which actually gets his attention. God decides to give Bruce all of his powers, so Bruce can see what it's like being him. Bruce has fun with his powers until he starts screwing up relationships, and then accidentally starts the apocalypse, ultimately leading Bruce to realize that fate should be in the hands of God instead. The concept of Jim Carrey playing God is what draws most people to this movie, and it does deliver that pretty well. The things he does during his time as God are fun, like playing with the stars, screwing with Steve Carell, and taking on a gang of criminals who had previously beaten him up. I think this movie has some really strong humor, as it had me laughing throughout. But this movie can also juggle its comedy with its emotional moments, which I think works just as much as the comedy. Now, at the start of the film, Bruce Nolan is sympathetic, but can be a little mean, mostly towards his girlfriend. But this can all be chalked up to intense stress, as in other points of the film, he's shown to be a pretty good guy. He does develop throughout the film, and after he screws things up with Grace, rather than pray to have her back, he prays for her happiness, whether or not that means them getting back together. The film actually does really well at showing the consequences of Bruce's actions, like how, by pulling the moon closer for romance, he actually screws with the planet, and how, by making everyone win the lottery, everyone only gets like $20. I thought that stuff was pretty good. The moments where you're supposed to feel emotional worked on me, and I thought the ending was really nice. Besides Bruce, I thought Morgan Freeman as God was pretty good, and I like how he's got a sense of humor to him. This is definitely a feel-good movie, with some great comedic scenes in it. It isn't perfect, but the good stuff is really inspiring here, and I recommend it for a nice time.
I am Bruce Almighty! My will be done!
Sonic the Hedgehog. When Sonic the Hedgehog has to abandon his old world for Earth, he is forced into hiding due to his hidden power. But, after making himself known by mistake, Dr. Robotnik is hired to capture him. Luckily, Sonic befriends a man named Tom who helps him throughout this journey. This movie really surprised me in more ways than one. Movies based on video games are notorious for being pretty bad, and people, including me, were expecting this to be no different. But to my surprise, this turned out to be an incredibly fun movie that made me love the characters. Even Tom, who I expected to be really bland, had an entertaining personality and was fun to have around. Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik was also really surprising to me. It's been a while since Jim Carrey's been in a true comedy movie, and I wasn't sure if he could still do it. And yet, here he is, just as energetic as he was in the 90s, playing this incredibly entertaining mad genius. Seriously, Jim Carrey's performance here is one of the best parts of the movie. Whenever he's on screen, he steals the show. He has so many great lines, and even some really cool moments of his technology. His odd mannerisms, which have him sometimes move like a robot, shows how detached he is from humanity, and it all works so well. It's not like Robotnik is the only good part though. This incarnation of Sonic is perhaps my favorite version of the character. In the games we don't really get many opportunities to see Sonic so emotional. I really felt for his character in this, and I really wanted to see him be happy. That's what really makes this movie work for me. I like the hero and the villain equally, so I'm never bored with what's on screen. Sonic the Hedgehog is a great fun time, and Jim Carrey proved that he's still got it after all of these years. I'm really looking forward to the sequel.
Can you feel it, Stone?
I can feel it, Doctor.
It's evolution, Stone. It's evolution!
When the truth is found to be light.
The Cable Guy. Stephen Kovacs is down on his luck after a failed marriage proposal, and things only get worse when he tries to get free cable from the cable guy named Chip. After that, Chip desperately tries to become Stephen's friend, and when he refuses, he finds out just how unhinged Chip really is. This was a movie that a lot of people didn't like at the time due to how dark it was, and at that point Jim Carrey hadn't really branched out into other serious roles yet. But, over time, people began to reevaluate the movie, and now people seem to actually kind of dig it. With my dark sense of humor, this kind of movie was right up my alley. The character of Chip is one of the most interesting characters Jim's ever played in my opinion. Years of having the television be his babysitter while his mother was too busy for him, turned him into this psychotic man who obsesses over people, and tries to make real life like a TV show. His antics are actually pretty funny when they aren't legitimately terrifying, and I really enjoy that balance. It even makes Chip a sympathetic character as it goes on, with him ultimately deciding to stop the babysitter by destroying the TV satellite with his body, in order to prevent more people from having to grow up like him. It's a pretty powerful ending in my opinion, and I think this movie's message is handled pretty well. The character of Stephen is pretty likable as well, and I do feel bad that he gets mixed up with Chip, considering all the insanity that comes from it. Also, Jack Black is in this as Stephen's friend, and he's pretty cool, possibly just by virtue of being played by Jack Black. I like how he looks out for Stephen, and tries to help him out with Chip. This movie's plot kept me invested, and I weirdly kind of wanted to see Steven and Chip become friends, if only because I wanted Chip to be better off by the end, instead of finding himself back in the cycle of obsessing over people. I'm really glad this movie is getting more respect nowadays, and if you haven't seen it yet, catch it on television or something. It's worth a watch.
The future is now! Soon every American home will integrate their television, phone, and computer. You'll be able to visit the Louvre on one channel, or watch female mud wrestling on another. You can do your shopping at home, or play Mortal Kombat with a friend in Vietnam. There's no end to the possibilities.
The Truman Show. Truman Burbank is unknowingly living in a TV show centered around his life, with every moment in his life being recorded and broadcasted on national television. But when he finally starts to see the signs, he learns the truth and tries to escape. The Truman Show is an amazing movie, and is the only one of Jim Carrey's more serious films that I really got into. The very concept of everything around you being staged is a very interesting one for a movie, and the journey Truman goes through keeps you interested the entire way through. Truman himself is a very likable hero, and Jim Carrey's usual over-the-top mannerisms are actually toned down here, with a more reserved goofiness that draws people towards him. I really wanted to see him escape, and see him meet with Sylvia again, since their interactions were really nice. The scenes where Truman catches onto the world cycles and then tries to escape while the actors do everything in their power to stop him are really fun. I like how Truman grows more and more unhinged as it goes along, with the people he fought were his friends revealing to not be very attached to him at all. This movie has several sad or deep moments in it that kept me emotionally invested, but it's also still got some humor in there. The crazy stuff is fun, the ways the actors stop Truman are fun. This movie isn't just dead serious. The Truman Show is just incredibly solid all the way through, and I could watch it for days on end.
In case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Yeah.
The Mask. Stanley Ipkiss has been having a hard time with his job and social life. The mean streets of Edge City beat him down until he finally finds the mask. After becoming a big-headed cartoon character, a group of criminals want to put an end to the mask, while Stanley tries to get a grip of what's going on. This movie has been one of my favorites since I was a kid, and I still think it's a great movie. First off, the mask himself is incredibly funny and interesting to watch. All of his cartoon antics are fun, and seeing them be pulled off in live action makes it even better. Getting Jim Carrey, someone who basically has a rubber face, was perfect casting. In my opinion, nobody could have done this role better. Asking Jim to play a cartoon character was always a good idea. Every time he's on screen, he has my attention, which is a pretty big positive for this film. But even then, he's not the only thing keeping this movie afloat. The character of Stanley Ipkiss is really likable. I'm really glad they changed things from the original comic. So, instead of making him a jackass, they make him the nicest guy in town. Someone who deserved a break, and should be allowed to have fun as the mask. Seeing him gain some confidence at the end is really nice, and it's great when he decides he doesn't need the mask to feel good about himself anymore. I wouldn't say this film specializes in emotional moments, but that is a very heartwarming ending. But I'm mostly here for the humor, and it always delivers on that front. Even beyond the mask himself, there's a lot of smart dialogue in here. I like the cops who are going after Stanley, and their weird sort of partnership. The villain was pretty good, and I do like how he weaponizes the mask at the end, sort of showing us what the movie would have been like if it were more faithful to the comics. Really, my reasoning for ranking this movie so high is ultimately based on how much fun I have watching it. This just really hits the right chord for me, I guess. I can't really explain it beyond that. It's just a hell of a good time.
This is incredible. With these powers, I could be a superhero! I could fight crime, protect the innocent. Work for world peace! But first...
Liar Liar. Fletcher Reed is a lawyer who lies for a living in order to win court cases, even if he doesn't believe in his side. But when his lying goes too far, and he lies to his son about being there for his birthday, his son wishes that he's unable to tell a lie for an entire day. And for a lawyer, you can imagine how that could be a problem. For me, Liar Liar is Jim Carrey's funniest movie yet. The very concept of a lawyer who can't tell a lie is amazing, and him trying to pull off the court case despite that is hilarious. But also just how he now has to go through daily life being completely honest leads to some hilarious scenes. Like with the police officer, or with his co-workers. It even extends to him having to reveal how he feels about himself.
What's your problem, schmuck? I'm an inconsiderate brat!
This movie is very impressive with how many of its jokes make me laugh. Almost every single one of them manages to get a big reaction out of me, more so than any other Jim Carrey movie, or really, more so than any other comedy I've seen in recent memory. It's one of my favorite comedies of all time, but what I really like is that this movie doesn't just end with great jokes, it's able to blend itself with some really good heart. Fletcher as a character has some great development throughout the film. At the start, he's a flawed man, but he isn't too bad. He's still likable enough to follow, but you can see how he needs to change. The scene where Fletcher truthfully says that he's a bad father, and then really has to think about that, is a good scene. This movie can do emotional moments well, and I really cared about the relationship between Fletcher and Max. Their relationship is the emotional core for the movie, and it had me invested. You never get the idea that Fletcher doesn't care about Max, he just prioritized work over him at the start. When Fletcher's ex-wife is planning to take Max away from him, you really want to see him prove himself to them both. There are so many good scenes in this movie. I really like Fletcher's clever way to finally win the court case, before immediately realizing that he's just let the bad guys win by stretching the truth, and then he tries to persuade the judge to change his mind. Ultimately, what I think makes this my favorite Jim Carrey movie is that it's able to be the funniest movie from him that I've seen, while also maintaining its well-done emotional scenes. This is the perfect blend for me, and that's why it turned out to be my #1, and I'm not lying about that.
What's wrong with me? I'm getting what I deserve, I'm reaping what I sow,
So that's my top 10 Jim Carrey movies. I had a lot of fun looking into these movies, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Now that I've finished my list, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.